Going on, everyone? John Matrix here. So today we've got another Warhammer 40k video for you. Hope you guys are having a wonderful start to the week. We're gonna check out another video here from the Amber King. This is another one that was requested by one of my YouTube members. This is Alpharius Omegon, Understanding 40k Lore, the Alpha Legion. So we're gonna learn about the Alpha Legion. I know a little bit about the Alpha Legion so far. From what I understand, it's kind of like a super secretive trader legion, I believe, if I remember correctly. And the Primarch is like a very mysterious character who, like, everyone in the Alpha Legion looks like him. They're like clones of him or something. So he has been like reported to have been dead or killed, but not really. So if I remember correctly, I could be wrong about that, but go ahead, and if you want to check out this video without my commentary, the original video and the Amber King's channel, I have a link down below in the description. So if you want to check out their stuff, go ahead and do that. But for now, let's get into this here video. All right, so we got the volume good. Bada boom, bada bing.
My name is a tool, nothing more. An identifier. The records will call us dishonorable, traitors to the Imperium. But all records lie. I am the Hydra, the threefold serpent. I am Alpharius.
Cut one head off and another one takes its place. There actually should be two more take its place.
Victory matters. Everything else is just delusion. With victory, we can build dreams. But without victory, they remain just dreams.
Interesting thing.
Peace is the hardest thing to achieve. Military victory and the disarmament of our enemies can be achieved through strength of arms. But peace is an altogether different beast. Its fragility cannot be maintained by those who are good people. Niccolo Machiavelli tells us that a good leader should have what he coined as criminal virtue: wisdom, strategy, strength, bravery, and ruthlessness. Surgical and infrequent cruelty is the uncomfortable truth of peace. For all of us who get to bask in the light of peace, there are those who have to operate within its shadows. There are people who have to make those ethical trade-offs in the defense of their home, kingdom, or imperium. I think to myself, am I capable of committing evil in defense of something? Would I make the hard decisions expected of a soldier in the shadows? It is deception, subterfuge, assassination, and lies that are found in the arsenal of the Imperium's soldiers of shadow, Primarchs of the Alpha Legion, Alpharius and Omegon. Two parts of a joint facade that is presented to the galaxy. A single Primarch, Alpharius Omegon, the face of the 20th Legiones Astartes.
I like the armor. That is one thing I will say, dude. The style of this armor, the like dragon scale looking armor, that looks dope as fuck. The green and the purple, but I would rather have the green overall. I like the look of the green. It just has like a very, I don't know, Jade Dragon like feel to it or something. I don't know. It reminds me of something. There's like something in the fringes of my brain that it's reminding me of, but I can't really quite picture it. But I like the armor. The scaled armor looks dope.
Primarch Alpharius Omegon, the face of the 20th Legiones Astartes. In the 40th millennium, the Primarch of the Alpha Legion is seen as a betrayer, a dishonorable combatant, a figure that has been confirmed dead numerous times, but all records lie. So what is the truth? What is the journey that has shaped this outcome? What has made these Primarchs who they are? What made them choose the path of perceived betrayal? It begins deep below the Himalayan mountains upon Terra, near the end of the 30th millennium. Foul entities of the warp burst into the gene labs of the Emperor of Mankind's most inner sanctums and stole away 20 capsules. One of these capsules raced through the wall, claws scratching upon the globe.
So is that really how it happened? Did Agents of Chaos actually break into the Emperor's, you know, genetic manipulation, you know, laboratory or whatever he wants to call it, his inner sanctum, as he says here? Because from I've never heard of how the Primarchs are actually scattered. I've just heard that through the various, videos and things that I've seen about it so far, that they were just essentially taken and scattered throughout the universe. But I've never heard how it actually happened. So is it true that, because that would be pretty crazy for the Agents of Chaos to actually break into the Emperor's Sanctum and just snatch him and GTFO. Talk about some Navy SEAL shit. I would think that would be one of the prime protected places of the Imperium during that time period, especially while he's still experimenting on creating the Space Marines, etc., etc. So that's interesting if that is the case.
Capsules. One of these capsules raced through the wall, claws scratching upon the glass, trying to get in. It was this capsule that emerged back into the material universe and began to fall, like a comet engulfed in flames. The capsule crashed high upon a snow-peaked mountain. It was from the wreckage that a large boy emerged, opening his eyes for the first time. Where was he? What had happened? Who am I? I am Alpharius. It was like the name was emblazed across his soul. As the boy spoke for the first time, he said his name. But it was no momentous moment. Even amongst the confusion of experiencing his senses for the first time, he knew the truth about his name. My name is a tool, nothing more. An identifier, a starting baseline, to be used when convenient and discarded when not. It was as if his very nature was imprinted within him. He began to rationalize and understand his environment to a level and speed that was superhuman. As the boy used his eyes for the very first time, he looked into the night sky and the smouldering wreckage that was his gestation capsule. He was alone, but not for long. As the sound of distant rumbling rose, something was coming towards him. He was young and small, and concluded hiding was his best course. Figures came forward covered in thermal and rebreather equipment to examine the wreckage. The conditions on the mountains were a freezing low oxygen environment, yet somehow the boy was fine. Scavengers come to examine the
advantage of having Primarch genetics: crash landing in a low oxygen environment on top of mountain peaks with freezing temperatures and being okay. Yeah.
environment, yet somehow the boy was fine. Scavengers come to examine the wreckage were prowling until a golden ship descended from the sky, and a glowing figure clad in ornate, beautiful armor leapt from the ship and landed amongst the smoking wreckage. The boy felt a wave of power wash over him. The presence of this figure filled a void within him. He felt an undying obedience to him. The figure told the boy to come out, and as the boy stepped over the corpses of the scavengers, he stood and looked up upon his father.
So, were some of the Primarchs found when they were still young? Because I was under the impression that the Emperor had been looking for the Primarchs, like he spent years looking for them. And, when he found them, they were pretty much adults. That's the impression that I have gotten from the lore so far. So, that's interesting if that's not the case.
Corpses of the scavengers, he stood and looked up upon his father, the Emperor of mankind, as did the Emperor look back at his first found son. I remember the first time Malcador let himself into my quarters.
Malcador.
We stared at each other for some time.
I always forget his name. I want to say Malachor every time, but it's Malcador. I don't even know. I know Malachor is like the name of some other figure from some other game or universe. I can't remember what. I want to say World of Warcraft, but I don't think it is. But yeah, I always get those two names confused. Every time I see him, Malcador, I want to say Malachor. Anyway.
The first time Malcador let himself into my quarters, we stared at each other for some time, as I was weighing him up, and he, I am sure, was doing the same. I concluded he intended me no harm, but I could feel the power within him. It was tightly shrouded, unlike in my father, but there nonetheless. Had I been required to kill him, I was not, at the time, certain how I would have gone about it.
I am here to teach you.
He said at last. I nodded to signify my understanding and acceptance.
What are you to teach me?
What do you think you should be taught?
He replied, and those dark, sharp eyes of his were on me like a predator, watching a prey animal to see in which direction it was going to flee. This was a test.
I am to watch and learn.
I replied. It had not been long since I had been found, but I was already growing in both body and mind. There were some texts available in my quarters, and I now had a great understanding of my context and of the world outside. They had mainly brought home to me how very unusual I was.
I am to watch and understand.
You are to watch, and to understand, and to act.
Malcador corrected me.
You are the secret of secrets, but you are no use if you do not act.
He walked to a desk on which were arrayed playing pieces, and sat down with exhalation.
The Emperor has revealed himself to the world because he must. He is visible. I am visible. Constantine Valdor is visible.
He cocked his head and regarded me with a little humor.
Valdor does not yet know about you. See how long you can keep it that way. You may treat that as a test.
I nodded. I had already learned of Constantine Valdor and the Legio Custodes, thanks to the information I had available. I strongly suspected there was far more to learn.
So was he like the first Primarch that the Emperor found? Because it sounds like from this that he was found very young. And yeah, he's kind of tested him and made him out to be almost a master of spies. The idea of, from a young age, teaching a boy to, keep his identity secret and safe, especially from, I guess, the leader of the Custodes. That would be a hell of a task, but interesting. From what I'm getting from this, it sounds like he was the first, if not one of the first, Primarchs that the Emperor found and began training.
Information I had available. I strongly suspected there was far more to learn.
You are not visible. You could be, the secret shield, the sword in the darkness, the weapon our enemies do not expect because their focus will be on us. You will do what you must to preserve what we have built, even without instruction, even if...
He trailed off and sighed.
This was not intended to be your destiny, but it is the hand that fate has dealt you. Has dealt us all, in fact.
I was intrigued as to what my intended destiny had been, but I kept my silence. If Malcador did not elaborate, I could return to the subject and ask him, and then he might answer, and he might not. If he kept talking, he might give me information I would not have thought to ask about. He tapped the board instead.
Come, sit opposite me. I'm presuming you have already familiarized yourself with the rules of this game.
I did as he asked.
I have. It is called Regicide.
Simple to learn, very difficult to master.
Malcador replied. We were within a meter of each other.
Those are the best games, by the way. Games that are easy to learn but can take years to master. Those are the best games. Those are the ones you always get addicted to.
Very difficult to master.
Malcador replied. We were within a meter of each other now, and I could smell his breath, which was as sharp as his eyes.
Or at least, that is how it is for most people. I suspect it will be a different matter for you. Let us find out.
He was to watch, and to understand, and to act. He was to be the secret shield, the sword in the darkness, the weapon their enemies do not expect, because their focus will be on those who are visible. Alpharius will do what he must to preserve what the Emperor has built, even without instruction. Only a handful of the upper echelon in the Imperium knew that one of the Primarchs, the Emperor's sons, had been found on Terra. No one else could know, not yet. For it was far more valuable to keep this weapon a secret, especially from the architect of the Primarch scattering. The Emperor was overjoyed to have one of his sons.
I
He
would
was
bet.
afraid that all of them had been lost, but the survival of Alpharius was hope that the others were alive. The Emperor knew what Alpharius had to be, and so his early tutoring came from Malcador the Sigillite, one of the few trusted with the knowledge of his existence. It was not in body, but in mind that the Sigillite began to train the young Primarch, teaching him to mask his thoughts from even an incredibly powerful psyker such as Malcador.
I need to learn more about Malcador. Because obviously, he is like the Emperor's most trusted friend, ally, his second, his right-hand man. He's like, it seems like he was there from the beginning, and he's trusting this person, this human, to teach the Primarchs. He also trusted him to set up and teach the Grey Knights. He seems like a figure that has as much importance in how a lot of things are set up in the Imperium as the Emperor, basically. But it just seems like it's one of those things where he's one of the guys that was like in the shadows almost doing a lot of this stuff while the Emperor was in the forefront leading. You know what I mean? Malcador is definitely a character I need to learn more about.
To mask his thoughts from even an incredibly powerful psyker such as Malcador. It was with the Sigillite that Alpharius began to develop a skill unique to him. Alpharius learned not to be invisible, but to completely mask his presence. For us, a regular human to be in the presence of a Primarch conjures feelings of innate majesty and wonder. Loyalty similar to how the presence of the Emperor feels akin to seeing a god. But Alpharius learned to mask it. He could change the way people perceived him. As such, he could look like a regular human, while still being a demigod-sized Primarch. The way this ability must have affected him must have been profound. Unlike his brothers, who could never quite live a normal life, Alpharius knew how it felt to be a normal person. He began to master this gift, becoming the sword in the darkness. Infiltration, subterfuge, and deception were taught to the young Primarch, and he learned with frightening speed.
So Alpharius is the 007 of the Primarchs. He's James Bond. He's the one that go out and get shit done in the shadows behind the scenes. I can dig it.
And deception were taught to the young Primarch, and he learned with frightening speed. Whilst many of his brothers would despise being seen as a tool, this never bothered Alpharius. He knew what he was, how he had to operate. The Emperor was building a unified Imperium that would unite humanity, and he was a tool to bring that future and protect it. He was the Imperium's greatest secret, but by far not the only one. It was during the latter part of the 30th millennium that Alpharius was shown one of these closely guarded projects of the Emperor. Using his ability, Alpharius masked his presence and strode through the constructing Imperial Palace with his father, all the way down to the gene laboratories. It was there for the first time he saw the Legiones Astartes, sons to him, like how he was a son to the Emperor. They were the next generation for the Imperium's elite warriors, and the 20th Legion were the luckiest of all, as they had a Primarch. Alpharius was there from the beginning, there to mold the Legion as he saw fit. The earliest known activities of the Legion saw it conduct abductions, targeted strikes, and assassinations to the Imperium's enemies on Terra. They, like their Primarch, were a secret too, a small elite force that often disguised themselves as other legions. In fact, Alpharius and the first of the 20th Legion were there when it came time to cleanse the Imperium of the Thunder Warriors, disguised as the First Legion.
Damn, so yeah, he was there from like the early stages. Okay. Interesting. So that was one of the things that I'd always kind of questioned was what would happen to the Primarchs if the Emperor had gotten them early and been able to raise them properly. And this Alpharius, sounds like he was found at a very young age. I was a boy still and was brought back and taught and trained in that way. To the point where he was even present for wiping out the Thunder Legion. Like that was, from what I understand, like early on, because the Thunder Legion were like the the alpha versions of the Space Marines, if you will. They were like the first test run. They weren't necessarily like... They were more barbarians that were just like genetically enhanced. They weren't as carefully manipulated, selected, etc. They weren't meant to be what the Emperor's image of, you know, the great warriors that the Space Marines were supposed to be. But yeah, that's just interesting to me. That's interesting.
Alpharius has spent decades under warriors, disguised as the First Legion. Alpharius has spent decades within the Imperium's shadows, weaved amongst disguises, infiltration, and lies as part of his training.
So I would assume, because, okay, you know, there's 20 legions, right? But 2 of them have been redacted and no one talks about. So I would obviously, Alpharius would know about them and what happened to them. So I wonder if, moving forward with his story, if that's part of what led him to become... maybe I'm wrong, but I swear the Alpha Legion is one of the traitor legions. So maybe that's part of what happened with him and why he broke off, was because he saw what happened to those other 2 legions that have been, you know, expunged from history. I don't know.
Weaved amongst disguises, infiltration, and lies as part of his training. But that era had come to an end, as with all the preparations met, the Emperor launched the Great Crusade. Criminal virtue, wisdom, strategy, strength, bravery, and ruthlessness. Niccolo...
You know, I wonder how it would make him feel, being that someone like he was the first Primarch to be found and raised by the Emperor and taught. But then Horus is the one that was granted the title of War Master and was, you know, put in charge essentially of the Great Crusade. So I wonder if that also plays into it. If he had a jealousy of that somehow, some way. That he wasn't necessarily chosen to lead the things behind the scene. Or maybe he didn't necessarily want to because that's what he was trained to be. He was trained to be like a spy master and he was supposed to be unknown.
Strategy, strength, bravery, and ruthlessness. Niccolo Machiavelli's criteria for a good leader coincides with what can also be a perfect soldier. With Alpharius' decades on Terra, he was trained ruthlessly to become the greatest Black Ops agent within the Imperium. Through his time honing his skills at deception amongst the populace of Terra, it also gave him sympathy for common people, though at times he had to be ruthless too, even if he took no pleasure from it. During his time on Terra, he sought to expose a weakness within the defense of the Imperial Palace. With a combination of manipulation, disguises, and ingenuity, he managed to infiltrate the defenses, only to be caught by a custodian guard, who he killed, and took his armor as a disguise.
Wow.
He justified it to himself too, as it was in the name of something greater, the defense of the Imperium and the Emperor. Managing to sneak his way through, Alpharius took position overlooking the Emperor's landing pad, only to be at the last second caught by Malcador and then attacked by Constantine Valdor. A brief duel took place until the Sigillite stopped it. Wearing the armor of one of his murdered soldiers must have been a strenuous first encounter between the 2 demigod figures.
I bet.
Alpharius, placing an override on a gun turret, had showed that he had outwitted the defense of Terra, and it needed shoring up. Though Alpharius had made his point, it just shows how far he was willing to go in the name of his duty. It was in a way for the greater good. It was this ideology that the Primarch took to the stars during the Great Crusade. As the forces of the Imperium spread out, it would be Alpharius who was tasked with investigating for the Emperor rumors of individuals who surpassed human. It was Alpharius who, even before the Emperor came to find the others, the Primarchs who were spread across the stars. It was on the world of Chthoniya that he found a brother, Horus Lupercal, but he did not embrace him, nor accept him, as it was his nature to distrust and observe. Using his gift, Alpharius observed his brother to see what he had become, and to evaluate him, for that was his role. Horus was the second Primarch found, but he could become a rallying point, a spark of hope, someone to be visible, something Alpharius could never be. Perhaps he may have wanted to just let down the facade and embrace his brother, as to finally have an equal, someone to understand him is something we all desire. But he is Alpharius, the shadow to the Imperium's light. In fact, Alpharius may have felt this desire to unshackle himself many times, as he was there for when most of his brothers were found, often disguising himself as a member of the other legions. He witnessed how many of his brothers saw the Emperor for the first time, seeing how, like him, they felt something fill a void within their heart. But for Alpharius he was different. Where many had felt complete, he felt this gnawing feeling within. He felt like something was missing, like a part of him was lost. He felt incomplete. Alpharius...
Yeah, through all this, I was gonna say, like, that must really actually, you know, you think about it psychologically, it almost sounds like Alpharius was kind of, I don't necessarily want to say he was like locked in a room, because he really wasn't, but the whole purpose of him was for no one to know about him. So he could never really be himself and interact with people as himself. He would always have to put on a facade of being someone else. So I wonder if it's a situation with him where he grew up never like really being able to figure out who he is and what he really wanted to do. I mean, obviously, you know, he had a wanting to fulfill the wishes of his emperor, you know, his father. But I wonder if that's also part of psychologically, like what happened to him and might have, I guess, made him go to the dark side, for a lack of better better phrasing, terminology, whatever you want to say. But yeah, it's interesting. And it's also, I would assume, probably why he also never really, you know, seems like he never really trusted anyone.
Missing, like a part of him was lost. He felt incomplete. Alpharius felt like he was one half of a whole. He could sense something else. Someone else. A gestation capsule roared through the warp, clawed at by creatures made of pure thought. It burst into the material universe, and in a blaze of fire it crashed upon a world. Amongst the burning wreckage a boy crawled out, having survived something that should have killed any mortal man. The boy was not a helpless child, and started to rationalize his surroundings in a way that would astound us. Where was he? What had happened? Where had I come from? There was only one thing he knew for certain. I am Omegon. The inbuilt genius of his mind let him discern that the inherent skills and knowledge he was born with was no accident. Someone had placed them there. As the boy looked around, he saw only emptiness. He was alone. As the boy grew, he scoured around the surface of the planet he had crashed onto, only to find no one. Only the ruins of a civilization. Even for a Primarch, growing up in isolation must have affected him, as it would us. Conrad Kurz and Lionel Johnson similarly spent their early years without normal human contact, which also had its consequences. The boy grew, scouring through the remnants of the world's dead civilization.
So is this a situation where they were like twins? Where Alpharius and Omegon are twins, essentially, and they, you know, one was brought back at a very early age to the Emperor and was raised by the Emperor. The other one lived his life and didn't have any kind of human contact at all throughout the early age. And so they have kind of different views, but they're essentially they're like opposites of each other almost, I guess. I guess it's not really the right way to say it. They're the same person, but, you know, just raised in obviously very different scenarios. One, you know, back at home with which I guess you could say the comforts of Terra and the Empire, while this one, you know, Omegon was, you know, essentially had to take care of himself and whatever world he lived on with nothing and no one to help him for a long time. If that's the case, you know, I'm still
The boy grew,
going on
scouring
here.
through the remnants of the world's dead civilization, finding a strange-looking Xenos spear and a Baroque-scaled set of armor. As the boy grew to a man, he thought more upon his hypothesis that he was in some way created. He'd always felt like something was missing, like he was one part of a whole, like something out there would complete him. Perhaps this was his creator, the one who had imprinted all this knowledge and physical prowess. He looked to the stars, and he knew he would find the truth out there. It is perhaps the greatest secret amongst all of the Imperium, the truth of the Primarch of the 20th Legion. Something had happened during the scattering of the Primarchs that no other had experienced. The 20th Legion had two Primarchs, twins, Alpharius and Omegon, two halves of one whole. The incredibly tumultuous energies of the warp had split the Primarch of the Alpha Legion into two. It was this hollow feeling that Alpharius had felt all his life. Though both of them were extremely practical, rational, and even somewhat emotionless, they were still human, a refined pinnacle, but still men. Alpharius, having landed on Terra, had experienced the Emperor and his presence, and the wonder it filled him with, but still there was that sense of being incomplete. Alpharius determined that he had a brother out there, one who was closer to him than any other. The years of the Great Crusade progressed. Alpharius and his elite Alpha Legion had gone from a small elite force to a Ghost Legion, a unit that lived within the shadows. They had had their Primarch from the very beginning, and he had molded them into an extremely effective fighting force. The warriors acted and spoke with an independence unheard of amongst the Adeptus Astartes, for if one were to cut off the head of the Legion, it still needed to operate and function. The Alpha Legion had spent decades as an advanced force, carving forward the path for other legions' victories, but they had become tired of this. Even Alpharius was not without some ego. He wanted to bring his legion into the light, to reward them for all of their accomplishments. All 19 Primarchs had been found over the decades of the Great Crusade, none who Alpharius was searching for, until the rumours came of a superhuman warrior who had been seen on a world invaded by the horrifying Slaw. Alpharius and an elite squad infiltrated the world infested by the brain-devouring Xenos. One by one they were picked off, each Marine sacrificing themselves for their Primarch, until on the brink of being overwhelmed, a warrior in Baroque-scaled armour barreled in. The two demigod figures fought side by side, leaving no foul Xenos alive.
That would be a sight to see, I bet. Like, this stuff, man, this is the stuff I'm talking about. I want to see this in a show. I want a TV series about this. Give it to me. I want it. Hurry up, Henry Cavill. Let's make this shit happen.
Figures fought side by side, leaving no foul Xenos alive. I approached cautiously. The enemy of my enemy is not necessarily my friend, and there are any amount of creatures in the galaxy who exist in a mockery of humanity's form. It was possible that my apparent new ally was not human at all. In fact, I suspect that was not the case, but then again, nor was I.
Thank you for your aid,
I said as I reached them. The armor's helmet, a Baroque visor, crested with rearing serpents, turned towards me, but although they still held their strange spear, they did not raise it towards me.
And you for yours,
they replied. Their voice was as deep as my own, and curiously unaccented.
I have not yet met a warrior who can slay even one of these fiends' constructs by himself, let alone 4. Truly, the Legiones Astartes are even mightier than this world's legends give them credit for. You know of the Astartes?
I asked.
By reputation only.
The figure reached up and removed its helm, and I found myself looking into a mirror.
I am Omegon.
I had never felt such joy, no victory, no celebration, no praise from my father had ever sparked within me the same rush of euphoria I experienced in that moment. Finally, after decades of searching, of yearning for something I only partly understood, I had it in front of me.
Well met, brother,
I said. disengaging the seal on my gorget and lifting my own helmet from my head.
I am Alpharius. I could feel your existence, of course,
Omegon said to me. We were in the control room in the bowels of the power station in which he had been hiding, and from whence he would venture out to search for supplies and kill any slaw he encountered.
I had always assumed it was the soul of the one who made me, but now I see my error. You knew you were created?
I asked. I studied his face. It was such a strange sensation.
Dude, I bet. I could only imagine that scenario, man. Like, think about that. You know, you have this sense and this feeling pretty much all your life that something isn't 100% right, that you're not a complete person. You know, there's something else out there for you, something, some way, somewhere. And in this strange, you know, random world that you get sent to, you know, you, and I mean, he went there because he heard rumors, obviously, about a great warrior, yada yada, and it gave him some kind of sense or feeling. So, but like, just the idea of essentially seeing another version of yourself and meeting that version of yourself and talking and learning of that version of yourself, because I mean, it's essentially you, but obviously not, because you've both had extremely different experiences in your life. So, I mean, I don't know. That would just be... It's such a strange, like, mind-boggling experience.
I asked. I studied his face. It was such a strange sensation. After being surrounded by my own gene sons who had embraced surgical alterations to resemble me, to see a face not my own that mirrored mine exactly.
I possessed a high level of innate deductive reasoning,
My twin replied.
sufficient to realize that the ruined device from which I'd crawled seemed an unlikely method of natural gestation.
I laughed.
What world was this on? I do not know its name.
Omegon said, slightly wistfully.
It had been settled once, but the civilization had died. Despite my best efforts, I was unable to determine how or even what they called themselves. I was the only sapient being on the entire planet, so far as I could tell. It wasn't until pirates landed looking to pick the ruins that I was able to take to the stars and escape it. Did the pirates not tell you its classification?
I asked. Omegon glanced at his weapon, which he called the Saracenat.
They were not in the mood for conversation, or for passengers, so I never got the opportunity to ask.
I nodded in understanding.
I was able to make short warp jumps using the ship's navigation charts and slowly began to find my way towards systems inhabited by humans.
Omegon continued.
I heard rumors of the Imperium and the Emperor. Given the stories about him, I felt certain he would have been the one who created me.
I just gotta say, this is a dope video so far. I'm not gonna lie. This is actually a pretty intriguing video, learning about Alpharion. He seems like a very, and Omegon, they seem like very interesting characters. I'm curious to learn what happens with them that gets them to portray the Emperor, I guess.
I had never felt such joy, no victory, no celebration, no praise from my father had ever sparked within me the same rush of euphoria I experienced in that moment. Finally, after decades of searching, of yearning for something I only partly understood, I had it in front of me. The twins were reunited. The Alpha Legion had the three heads of the Hydra: Alpharius, Omegon, and the Legion. Alpharius was elated to be reunited with his brother, the other half of his soul. He had spent over 8 hours telling him everything about his life and his gifts. They shared so much more than just aesthetics, a brilliant calculating mind, an adept understanding of subterfuge, manipulation and espionage. But something unnerved them. The Emperor of Mankind spoke of 20 sons, yet here they were, 21. Did the Emperor keep Omegon a secret just as Alpharius was a secret to his brothers? Or perhaps, as Omegon proposed, they were two beings and one soul per se. Perhaps their time in the Immaterium had split one into two. Perhaps the Emperor does not even know the galaxy-shaking secret. The last Primarch had been found, and though both of the twins were superhuman experts in being in the shadow to the Imperium's light, they are still human, and not without a little human ego. They were unsatisfied with the 20th Legion forever being unrecognized in their sacrifice. It was time to bring the 20th Legion and its Primarch into the forefront of the Great Crusade. It had to be done right, as to maintain the secrets of the Legion's pre-Crusade history and knowledge of the nature of the twin Primarchs, for this secret could be extremely useful. The Primarch of the Alpha Legion would become Alpharius Omegon, a facade, just as how the Emperor, Malcador and Constantine Valder were visible. The character of Alpharius Omegon would be too, a careful act to be played by both of them and their Legion, a figure who could be everywhere, a symbol for the 20th Legion, but who would play the role?
Everyone.
Spending over a century in anonymity in the Imperium, seeing its rise from the start, Alpharius knew all of his brothers. Though he was a master of manipulation and possessed his gift of masking his presence, the scrutiny of a Primarch may see through this over time. Alpharius had even noted the times he stood before Lionel Johnson and had felt his keen eyes. It was to be Omegon, the man who had grown up in isolation who would become the face of the Legion. His reaction would be genuine. The twin Primarchs enacted the next greatest secret of the Imperium, a secret they kept even from their own Legion. They traded places. Alpharius discarded his name, for it was only a starting point, a tool, and he became Omegon, and Omegon became Alpharius, a lie that even their own sons believed.
So interesting.
Omegon set up a deceptive ambush. Masquerading as a ragtag pirate fleet, he infiltrated the flagship of his brother, Horus Lupercal. Playing his part well, he stormed the bridge and fought with a skill only capable of a Primarch. Horus screamed at the intruder. He was elated because he had found a brother, for who else could it be? Gripped by the charisma of Horus, Omegon removed his Baroque helm, genuinely awestruck by his presence, and uttered the lie, "I am Alpharius." The last Primarch had been found in the Imperium's eyes. The 20th Legion came into the light and set out to join the Great Crusade as a fully fledged Legion.
I wonder how the Emperor felt about that, because obviously, I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know if he would really necessarily care one way or the other. Because so far in this, it was really Malcador that kind of brought him up and taught him to stay in the shadows. I don't know if that was necessarily, it's not stated from what I know so far and from what they're talking about in this video. There's nothing that said that the Emperor wanted that to happen, right? So the Emperor might not really necessarily care. And also just because the Emperor at a lot of times almost seems, I don't know what the proper word is. He had almost, from what I understand, from what I know so far, the Emperor very much seemed to have almost an attitude, as long as they're doing what I want them and expect them to do, I don't necessarily care how they get it done. With the exception, obviously, being, what's his name? I can't, again, I'm sorry. I'm so bad with names. It's the Primarch. I want to say the Word Bearers, but I don't think it's the Word Bearers. Maybe it is. The Primarch that was trying to basically turn the Emperor into a god, and that really sparked off the heresy when the Emperor, you know, went a little overboard and scorched earth their home planet. That, anyway, beyond those things, it seems like the Emperor really has an attitude of as long as I get done what I want it to get done so I can focus on the things that I want to focus, I don't necessarily care. So it may be a situation where the Emperor didn't necessarily matter or didn't necessarily care. But it's obviously these guys are super intelligent. Probably maybe even the smartest of the Primarchs, being able to pull off these, manipulations like this. And obviously it's very thought out, very planned. This is the kind of stuff that I honestly love too, because I'm very much that way. I very much, I'm very much a planner. I very much think ahead, and I tend to think of things in like chess terms, I guess. This happens, then this happens, and then I can do this, then that. And that's how I approach a lot of things. So it seems like they kind of have that kind of thinking methodology too, of trying to be several steps ahead of everyone and everything to achieve whatever goals they're going for.
We did not need to kill them.
That is true. We could have waited for you to grind your way through their troops, step by tedious step.
The future cannot be won by a war waged in shadows.
It will not be won any other way.
Then that future will be dead before it can begin.
Do not moralize at me, brother!
Spat Alpharius, and now it was his turn to flick from control to anger.
Would the deaths of all those that you would have killed been acceptable because they died in open battle?
Yes,
said Dawn. Alpharius held Dawn's gaze.
I think we see the universe very differently, Rogel.
No, I do not think we see the same universe at all.
They looked at each other, both of their faces set, so similar for all their differences.
The end matters,
said Alpharius at last.
Victory matters. Everything else is just a delusion. With victory, we can build dreams. But without victory, they remain just dreams.
And how would you salvage a dream from your victory, here and now on this world? We cannot trust the world prince to rule for us, and you have removed those who could have taken his place. Even a defeated people prefer rule on their own. You have won this battle, but you have done it by seeding the ground with resentment and bitterness.
Some would call what I did gentle.
I want to talk, just taking that excerpt there, that I'm assuming he's speaking as Dorn when he says, even a defeated people prefer to rule on their own. It just made me think of, that's, one of the things that the Persian Empire did, like, way back in the day. During King Darius's rule or whatever, one of the things that made their empire expand so quickly is he would conquer them, but essentially allow them to rule themselves and have their own religious beliefs, etc., etc. And it allowed their country to expand so greatly, back in the ancient days. So there is definitely some truth in that, even in victory, allowing the conquered to essentially rule themselves and continue their lives as they were, definitely has some merit. As long as they, prove fealty or, do what they're expected when called upon, allow them to live their lives how they want.
With resentment and bitterness.
Some would call what I did gentle, compared to the ways of our other brothers. Kurz, Mortarion, Angron, even the Khan and fetid Horus. Would you call what they would have done preferable?
They?
Began Dawn.
You are certain that you are right,
said Alpharius.
But if you disdain me, then why not my maker? Why not our father?
Dawn shook his head and began to turn towards the door. Arcamus moved with him. He could feel the pressure of his lord's anger, aching through the air like cold from a glacier. Dawn stopped at the doors and turned back.
Your initial strikes were misdirected,
he said to Alpharius.
You infiltrated one hive and made it fall by a systematic destabilizing of authority. But you should have waited. You could have used it as a node from which to disperse your human operatives and agents into the other hives. You managed that to a degree, but you could have forced a total collapse in their defenses across the planet. and not just surrender by assassination. That move was also mistimed. Another 37 hours, and the pressure from our assault would have been eroding their ability to communicate. Secondary psychological fear, doubt, and confusion would have been rising to a peak. You could have ridden that, played and controlled its pace, forcing hives to fall or change sides at the exact moment when it would amplify whatever effect you wanted. What you did was effective, but it was not optimally so by your own criteria.
Dawn stared at Alpharius, but the Alpha Legion Primarch did not reply.
I know you, brother,
Continued Dawn.
I knew that you were here before I walked through the door. I knew it was you on that throne, but not because you made an error in your masquerade. You made no mistake, yet I still knew it was you. Think on that, brother. It is not that I do not understand what you are or what you do. I understand both. We are what we choose to be.
Dawn turned and walked to the doors. Arcamus followed.
For the Emperor.
Said Alpharius.
Interesting. That was an interesting back and forth there between those two.
To hold and take part in the greatest secrets of the Imperium has its consequences. The twin Primarchs following their reunion spent decades on the forefront of the Great Crusade. The Alpha Legion fought with expert precision, infiltration and assassination. They were the 20th Legion, but named Alpha. It was not an irony, it was a statement.
They were the first.
They were on top. They were the best. It is understandable that we as people never want our sacrifices to go unacknowledged and unremembered, but was this needed for a so-called Ghost Legion? Alpharius, Omegon, and the Legion are still human, and not without human ego. Is it, how Dawn says, that the way they waged war was not ultimately so by their own criteria, almost like they are showing off? And what does it mean to chase victory by any means? Did the tactics of Alpharius and the early Alpha Legion in the shadows of the Imperium really belong in the light? The truth is revealed in the words, victory matters. Victory by any means is a choice, an ethical outlook that says the ends justifies the means.
Yep. That goes into the thinking of the whatever it takes for the greater good. And that always leads people down a very slippery slope, man. Because, you know, what are your... Essentially gets to the point where are you willing to sacrifice your humanity for what you consider to be, you know, the greatest good of humanity? And then what does that look like? I mean, there's, you know, numerous people through history that have said that statement. It's for the greatest good, but have done horrible things to others to achieve that. So, yeah, it's all a matter of perspective.
Is a choice, an ethical outlook that says the ends justifies the means. Dawn and even Gulliman despised Alpharius Omegon, who in a joint campaign with the Ultramarines took to using overly complicated strategies over simple ones. This caused a 90% casualty rate upon the world's human defenders. When the raging Gilliman questioned the 20th Primarch before him, Alpharius Omegon responded, "It would have been too easy." An outcome that would have been extremely uncharacteristic of Alpharius, the Primarch who has spent many years perfecting his presence-altering gift amongst ordinary people, learning to sympathize with them, versus Omegon, the Primarch who had grown up with no one, and perhaps not with the experience that would humble him to base humanity. They were twins, two halves of one whole, the closest amongst all brothers. Perhaps not everything about them aligned. Their ethics would be tested in the latter days of the Great Crusade by a man named John an agent of the alien organization known as the Cabal. The Cabal revealed to Alpharius and Omegon the outcome of Horus being named War Master. It would set them down a path of war that would burn the Imperium from within, the Horus Heresy. Two psychic visions enveloped the twin Primarchs. If the Emperor won the impending civil war, the Imperium of Man would slowly decay over millennia, becoming a rotten mockery until it and trillions of souls were ultimately consumed by chaos. Immense foul warp entities that called themselves gods. The other vision showed that if Horus won the war, after 2 to 3 generations, Horus would be racked with guilt for slaying his father, and would ultimately obliterate all chaos-tainted factions in the galaxy, but humanity would be destroyed in the process, taking down the dark gods with them. It was defeat down each path, one a slow death and victory for chaos, or the other a quick end that will destroy the foul dark gods. What would you do with such information?
I would think they would want to do part B. I would think they would want to, yeah, with their mind at least a victory against the chaos gods, again at any cost, would be more important than just allowing humanity to die a slow, decaying death. So I could see that being, yeah, the ultimate. It would be interesting if it is that simple, because if it just came down to that little choice, the psychic vision that they had, knowing that, you know, and it also makes you wonder, like, how much truth is in that vision, how much of it was manipulated, because, you know, if the Emperor were to win, well, I mean, I wonder if what they're seeing is technically the truth, because the Emperor winning, he obviously did win in the end against Horus, but the decay would be that, you know, he would be trapped in his golden throne like they did, and, you know, humanity has been kind of in a slow decline, going into a dark ages, essentially, since that. So if they're able to see everything that happens, and if they're able to see that humanity would never be able to recover from, you know, the Emperor being injured, even though he won against Horus, and that would lead to their slow death, then, yeah, it would just be a better obvious choice for them to side with Horus, knowing that eventually the Chaos Gods would lose their grip on him. He would be extremely regretful, but would unite humanity in a way to go and actually destroy the Chaos Gods. I mean, it seems like, yeah, that would be the choice to go for. And I mean, ultimately, I wonder how much Alpharius and Omegon would know from the Emperor and him wanting, because I still feel from everything that I've learned so far that everything the Emperor has been setting up is to essentially eventually fight and destroy the Chaos Gods in some way, diminishing their power by going out and conquering the universe, spreading humanity, denying their existence, preventing them from gaining more power, and then eventually, when they're weak enough to either invade the warp and destroy their essence and scatter it, or just get them to the point where their power is just so diminished they don't have any kind of effect anymore. And then, you know, as the souls of humanity would die, they would actually have, you know, a peaceful place to go to and have an afterlife in the warp. And, you know, I don't know if there's any kind of reincarnation or anything like that in the 40k universe other than the perpetuals. But so my point is, I wonder how much, if anything, of that, if that's the case, Alpharius, being he was the first, would know what the you know, how much information would he know from the Emperor, being that he's, you know, this spy master there from the beginning with the Emperor from the earlier days. How much would he have learned what the Emperor's true goals would be, and if that would be, you know, if one of the ultimate goals of the Emperor would be to actually destroy the Chaos Gods, would he then not necessarily, even if the Emperor died, you know, at the hands of Horus, if the Chaos Gods are destroyed, would that not be, you know, an ultimate victory, you know? Would that not be him completing the goal of the Emperor, and thus would he think to himself, I'm not betraying the Emperor? If the Emperor is going to be wounded and going to be decaying and not able to really help humanity, and humanity is just gonna eventually rot away in the to chaos, wouldn't it be better for the Emperor to essentially be a sacrifice and then fight with Horus against the agents of chaos later? So yeah.
Destroy the foul dark gods. What would you do with such information? How do you react when the fate of the galaxy rests on your shoulders?
Right.
Alpharius and Omegon began to decide what...
Because knowing that information, I mean, you sit here and you think, you know this information, could you then change the future? Or would it be a situation where knowing that information and acting upon it in any way would just create that future? Like if you were to go to the Emperor and say, hey dog, look, I've had these psychic visions, I know what's going to happen, Horus is going to turn to chaos and betray us, we need to do something about this before it gets out of hand, would that not lead that to that eventual future? You know what I mean? So would it be a situation where you should just not act and let things play out and see what happens and then choose a side from there? Or would you choose a side from the beginning? And would it be that the event of you choosing a side actually brings about that future? It's one of those weird time paradox things where if you made a certain choice, would it lead to the eventual future that you saw? And if you just did nothing and let events play out, would that happen anyway, or would it change the future?
Galaxy rests on your shoulders. Alpharius and Omegon began to decide what side they would be on for the wars to come. He was to watch, to understand and to act. It was the teachings of Malkador that formed the foundation of what Alpharius took to every mission, warzone and decision. The Cabal were dangerous, but what was more important was the information that they had given. The Alpha Legion likely played along in the beginning, as it was more useful to let an enemy reveal more information.
Right.
The Legion and the Primarchs contemplated their choice. Secrets and lies was the way of the Legion. They'd often made choices without approval, so they chose victory. It was their responsibility, as it always had been. Just like the custodian guard who was killed in the name of Imperial defense, the Alpha Legion chose to side with the traitors in the defense of the galaxy. They believed the visions of the Cabal. Perhaps if presented to any other Primarch, they would have run straight to the Emperor, but they were warriors of shadow. They knew no other way. The dark gods of the warp corrupted Horus, just as the visions had predicted, reviving him from his mortal wounds, and set him down the path of betrayal. And when the now corrupted War Master asked, the Primarch Alpharius Omegon answered. After the virus bombing of Isfahan III, the presumed loyalist Alpha Legion was one of the Space Marine legions sent by the Emperor to destroy Horus and the traitor legions upon Isfahan V. Assigned to the second wave, the Legion instead turned on their loyalist allies. It became a bloodbath and was known as the Drop Site Massacre, one of the most violent battles in the Imperium's history. Yet curiously, some of the survivors had been allowed to escape, including Korax of the Raven Guard, though this was used as an opportunity to place disguised operatives amongst the survivors. The Alpha Legion agents followed the survivors all the way to Kievar, where a rebellion was incited. The operatives used it as cover to poison the fresh gene stock sent to rebuild the Legion, turning the new Marines into monsters, leaving the Raven Guard decimated, or out of the way. The years of the heresy progressed, and Alpharius, Omegon and the Legion slaughtered their loyalist brothers across the imploding Imperium, even managing to blockade the uninformed White Scars upon their homeworld of Chagoris. It was during this standoff that Lord Omegon came to one of his captains, offering his blood. Amongst all the Primarchs, it was not just the gift of mass presence that belonged to the 20th Primarchs. Legionaries who ingested their blood could temporarily gain a small portion of their power and access to the Primarch's memories. The captain was given a task so secretive it could never be recorded. A crack team Alpha Legion squad were tasked by Lord Omegon to destroy a local pylon array garrisoned by their own brothers. The squad was successful, but was sacrificed to keep the knowledge secret. With the destruction of the array, a signal roared onto Jagoris, informing them of the truth of the heresy. It was Alpharius. Having traded places with Omegon decades ago, he had assumed the title in secret from his legion. Alpharius loved his brother.
I want to rewind this and listen to some of this again. I'm losing a little bit of this here. We're going to rewatch this last little bit. I was a little confused when he was talking about the mission so secretive that giving them the blood. I didn't know if he was talking about the White Scars captain or if he was talking about one of the Alpha Legion guys having to do that. So I'm a little confused about what he's talking about here.
The years of the heresy progressed, and Alpharius, Omegon, and the Legion slaughtered their loyalist brothers across the imploding Imperium, even managing to blockade the uninformed White Scars upon their homeworld of Jagoris. It was during this standoff that Lord Omegon came to one of his captains, offering his blood. Amongst all the...
So Omegon came to one of whose captains? I'm assuming the White Scars captain? Is he... So Omegon is actually Alpharius since they swapped back in the day. So is he trying to essentially warn them by giving them his blood so they can have the memories and see the truth of it? Of what's going on with the Alpha Legion isn't necessarily what he believed in, kind of a situation? Oh my god, I went to one of the Alpha Legion captains? Okay.
The Primarchs, it was not just the gift of mass presence that belonged to the 20th Primarchs. Legionaries who ingested their blood could temporarily gain a small portion of their power and access to the Primarch's memories. The captain was given a task so secretive it could never be recorded. A crack team Alpha Legion squad were tasked by Lord Omegon to destroy a local pylon array, garrisoned by their own brother.
I get you. Okay, so he wanted to give him information about a mission he wanted him to do, and he did so by giving him some of his blood so he can ingest it and get that knowledge. Because the mission was so secretive, they didn't want to have any kind of communication that could be intercepted. I got it now.
Lord Omegon.
I thought it was a situation where, you know, Alpharius and Omegon had switched places. Omegon, being actually Alpharius, might have had a difference of, you know, because they grew up differently, because they thought differently, even though they're, you know, twins and they share the same soul situation, whatever, you know, they might have different perspectives. So I thought it was a situation where the original Alpharius was trying to give blood to one of the White Scar guys so they could understand that he was actually the original Primarch, and that he wasn't trying to go along with the traitor legions, etc., and that he was actually still loyal to the Emperor. I just hit my mic there, so sorry if you had a little boom there. But anyway, that's what I thought was going on. But no, it's a situation where the mission was so secretive that he didn't want to have any kind of communication, so he did the blood thing. Okay.
Never be recorded. A crack team Alpha Legion squad were tasked by Lord Omegon to destroy a local pylon array, garrisoned by their own brothers. The squad were successful, but were sacrificed to keep the knowledge secret. With the destruction of the array, a signal roared onto Jagoris, informing them of the truth of the heresy. It was Alpharius. Having traded places with Omegon decades ago, he had assumed the title in secret from his legion. Alpharius loved his brother and was doing what he was taught, to watch, to understand, but now he was acting. He was engaging in operations in secret against his own legion and brother.
Okay, so he was. So he was trying to, he was still loyal, I guess, to the Emperor and was acting against his own brother by doing this, trying to get a signal out to warn everyone. Okay.
Engaging in operations in secret.
Even the spy shit's all confusing, but I love it.
But now he was acting. He was engaging in operations in secret.
So I wonder if then, you know, Malcador knew from the beginning And even maybe the Emperor, because, you know, psychers and foresight and visions and all that kind of stuff. I wonder if they knew from the beginning that some of this was going to happen. And so that's why he told them and trained them this way to, you know, act, but stay in the shadows and only act when needed, you know, kind of a situation. I don't know, because it gets a little confusing with certain things, you know, because when you have foresight of the future, then you have to ask questions as to why did you let certain things happen and why did you not prevent certain things, or can you not prevent these things, etc., etc. Because if you have visions of the future where you know there's going to be a heresy situation, there's going to be a civil war, why not prevent it to begin with? You know, kind of a situation. Why not, you know, whatever. So, but then again, you know, it could be that the heresy leads to some other greater thing happening. You know, like the theory of the Emperor potentially becoming, you know, with humanity's faith, the Emperor could becoming, you know, a new god of some sort to even challenge the Chaos Gods more so. And so that maybe that was the Emperor's plan from the beginning, knowing this was all going to happen, etc. You know, I don't know. Who knows? Well, I guess we'll find out eventually. But it's just one of those things where when you start having like foresight and the, you know, the ability to see the future and potentially manipulate events, it starts bringing up various questions. But anyway, let's continue.
Stand, but now he was acting. He was engaging in operations in secret against his own legion and brother. He was steering the course of the war through the shadows of his own legion. After all, he was the weapon the Imperium's enemies did not expect. Omegon woke. He had never slept, never dreamed, or felt the tug of mortal fatigue in all the days of his existence. Yet here he was waking from black oblivion to the cold deck of the ship beneath him. The darkness of his arming chamber closed about him. The pulse of beta engine was a distant rumble on the edge of silence. Coldness poured through his flesh. Moisture beaded his skin. He could taste blood in his mouth, thick and harsh with iron. His hands were numb. The fingers hooked as though grasping something that had vanished. He moved the fingers and then brought them up to his face. Sharp needles of pain prickled beneath his touch. And then a new feeling came, crushing in its weight, undeniable in its truth, though he could not tell how it had arrived. He was alone. Words began to form on his tongue, but the door to the chamber was already opening. Arcos stood in the light of the door, his battleplate humming as he stepped within.
Lord Omegon,
Arcos said, bowing his head briefly, then stopping as his eyes fell upon his Primarch.
is there something wrong?
No.
Is there? He blinked. Cold spirals of light were briefly at the edge of sight. Alone.
Is there word from Lord Alpharius?
Omegon asked. Still looking at his hands, he could sense Arcos's frown without needing to see it.
None,
He said.
but there is something else.
Omegon looked up, the muscles of his neck cold as they moved.
War Master Horus wishes to consult directly with Lord Alpharius.
Do we have any indication of what his concern is?
No, Lord.
Said Arcos.
Our sources within the War Master's court have become unreliable.
Omegon nodded, glancing over his shoulder as though he had heard something in the empty dark.
Prepare the Metatron.
He said.
I will speak with my brother.
The
Arcos
Metatron,
nodded,
interesting.
his gaze lingering on his Primarch for an instant before he left. Alone. Omegon armored himself. The blind servitors bolted in the plates of armor over his flesh, as the numbness in his hand and neck became a smoldering pain. I am alone. The knowledge rose through the coldness of his thoughts. Certain and inescapable, though he could not say how he knew that it was fact, not fear. He had never been alone, not truly. Even from the first spark of thought in his consciousness, he had known that he was one of many, a fragment of a greater whole, a piece of great destiny. He walked from his armory, the scaled and crested helm of the Primarch of the Alpha Legion under his arm. Arcos was waiting in the sealed chamber, where they kept the Metatron. Omegon nodded, and the attendants began to unbolt the mask from the one-time Astropath's head. He watched as the famine-thin figure writhed, ghost light and smoke pouring from its mouth, to form a shadow in the air above it. A shadow with a face and form. Frost spread across the floor and his armor. He bowed his head, even as the shadow turned to look at him. What had happened? What was happening? What was he now? As he realized that the words he was about to say would trap him for the rest of existence, the jest turned into mocking truth.
I am Alpharius. What is your will, my War Master?
He is alone. That feeling of being incomplete returned. Over the years, the heresy ravaged the Imperium. Alpharius had been sabotaging the traitors, doing so in secret, as perhaps he did not want to so openly confront his brother and tear the Legion apart, especially as he was Omegon, and the Legion had spent over 2 centuries in loyalty to Alpharius, who was secretly Omegon after their reunion. The heresy progressed all the way to the solar system, with the Alpha Legion leading the charge upon the station on Pluto. As the Legion fought its way onto the platform, they were countercharged by the Imperial Fists and the Primarch Rogul Dawn. A duel broke out between Omegon, masquerading as Alpharius Omegon, and the Praetorian of Terror. The clash was fierce, and was so blindingly violent, it truly was a battle between demigods. Omegon, overconfident, fell into Dawn's trap, and he killed him. Alpharius, back on his flagship, felt it instantly. He felt the shock. I believe Alpharius along the way began to question their path. He had spent his early life right at the heart of the Imperium. He was the first Primarch found, and his loyalty must have been just as strong as any of his brothers. But he is torn in the direction of his twin, and his loyalty to him, to the path of victory. The psychic predictions of the Cabal has started to play out. It made the twins believe it was real, and they chose what they thought their father would do. Victory. Over time, perhaps he lost his surety in the Cabal's predictions. Maybe not everything is written in stone. The Cabal even stated to them that they knew Alpharius Omegon was the last Primarch found, but that was true for only one of them. Alpharius steered his legion and brother through the tactics that were in his blood, lies and deception. It was in a way to try and fight for the Imperium, but also to protect his brother from a legionary civil war. He loved him. Their bond was closer than any one of us could really understand. They were 2 halves of a whole. Even the rational Alpharius must have struggled with the fact that he had to deceive the one he was closest to. Sometimes we all lie to protect the ones we care for, but all of it was in vain. Omegon was dead. The Primarch who grew up alone, the last found Primarch, the one who joined the Legion upon its unveiling to the Imperium, the man who only knew the victories the Legion had brought to the Great Crusade. Alpharius was alone, and as if it was a cruel joke, he alone ascended to the facade he and his brother had created. He became Alpharius Omegon. He could no longer discard this name. It was no longer a tool. Sometimes we forget the cost that lies have upon us. The facades we create can often be crushing, as they are ideal versions of what we have to live up to. Alpharius had enjoyed anonymity for so long, and now it was all taken away in the name of a cause he did not believe in. Alpharius appeared alone on Ullanor during the muster of traitor forces, in preparation for the Siege of Terror. No other Alpha Legion forces were present in the system, making many of the other traitors wonder how Alpharius could even be there at all. Before Horus's dark triumph on Ullanor, Alpharius appeared in the War Master's command tent and gave him a cylinder which contained a detailed layout of all the Sol system's defences and infrastructure. Alpharius then took out a dagger and shattered it in his hand, throwing the pieces at Horus's feet before leaving. The Legion had been branded traitors. They had killed their loyalist counterparts. They had sacrificed a Primarch. Alpharius was done. and the traitors would have to assault Terra without them.
Interesting, man. This is such an interesting story. And honestly, he's probably the most interesting, other than the Emperor, maybe. He's Alpharius Omegon. This is probably like the most interesting character that I've learned about so far. Just the duality of them. You know, essentially one, because of, and again, that goes back to my question, my what if question of their upbringing and what would have happened with a lot of the Primarchs had the Emperor been able to raise them properly, or, you know, if you want to say properly, or has he intended. Because obviously, Alpharius, being raised by the Emperor back in Terra as a young boy, has completely, you know, changed his... He has a completely different view and understanding than Omegon, who was essentially raised in isolation on a planet and had to survive on his own. Even though they're the exact same person, their life experiences have molded them into having different beliefs. So, and it's interesting that his, you know, it's one of those things where I bet he would probably, looking back on it, would regret not just going to the Emperor and being like, hey, this happened, you know, we, like, just going to him to begin with and said, hey, we're twins. There's two of us, you know, and maybe given Omegon his own legion, or had just, that would be the only legion with two Primarchs. And they would have dual command. Or who knows, maybe because, you know, who knows what will happen. But obviously his loyalty to his brother seems to be what allowed him to, in the vision of the Cabal, you know, was what allowed him to go down that path. But as time went by, his loyalty, I guess, to the Emperor and to the Imperium was stronger. And because he was working against his brother the whole time and against his own legion the whole time during most of the heresy, trying to save what he could. I don't know, it's such an interesting character and story. You know, it's almost kind of he's almost a very tragic character, you know, because obviously he has love for the Emperor and loyalty to that, but, you know, his brother, his twin, is the other half of him, and so he has loyalty to them too. And he's, yeah, I don't know, it's just such a tragic story almost, really.
A legion divided, the 20th had chosen to sacrifice humanity by siding with the traitors and directing the path of time towards the destruction of the foul dark gods. But their Primarch was dead, the one they believed to be Alpharius, the one who had molded them from the very beginning, the one who had imprinted the creed that if one head of the Hydra was cut off, another would take its place. Alpharius, who became Omegon, had assumed the single title, the facade Alpharius Omegon. But where
and this picture here is such great imagery too. The helmet being split in two, the two halves of him, you know. That's such a cool picture.
Assumed the single title, the facade Alpharius Omegon. But where did his legion's loyalty lie? Perhaps there were many who believed in the victory at all costs, because it was how they were trained. How many would defy the ascension of who they saw as one who was betraying the wishes of their founding Primarch? Though lies had often been useful in how the 20th operated, it had its consequences too. Alpharius was in charge of an independently spirited legion whose information and layers of secrecy put them on the brink of collapse. How could Alpharius face Horus with his divided legion versus the assembled traitors? Alpharius had chosen the other path. He chose the slow decay of humanity. But why did he believe he could change his fate? Because all records lie. He understood and weaved lies like it was an absolute of his nature. Alpharius could not choose a path that sacrificed the common people. A path that
sword
truly
looks like
betrayed
Frostmourne.
the Emperor. I believe Alpharius recognized what he truly was. What path he had to take to create the ultimate victory. It is the words of Malcador spoken 2 centuries ago on Terra that still ring true. He must be the sword in the darkness, the secret shield, the weapon their enemies do not expect. Alpharius had to return to the shadows. He had to become the ghost, just like he was before. He had to be the traitor amidst the traitors. With the close of the Siege of Terra, the Emperor slew Horus, but was crippled and interred upon the Golden Throne. The Alpha Legion did not follow the retreating traitor legions into the Eye of Terror. It was years later, on a world known as Escrador, that Alpharius and Rabute Guilliman, a Primarch that despised the facade of Alpharius Omegon, would meet for the last time. Believing that Guilliman would adopt his standard deployment procedures, as later outlined in the Codex Astartes, Alpharius was surprised by the Ultramarines. A splinter force, including their Primarch, made a quick strike at the Alpha Legion's headquarters. Alpharius, playing up his role, was reportedly happy with such a development, as it allowed him to demonstrate his force's superiority. Both Primarchs met in combat, and Alpharius Omegon for a second time was reportedly killed. Believing the combat over, for what Astartes Legion could ever survive the loss of their Primarch in battle, the Ultramarines were taken by surprise by the remaining elements of the Alpha Legion. They were struck back a solar day later. The Ultramarines who had launched the attack on the Traitors Legion's headquarters were harried so mercilessly that by the time they had returned, their casualties were almost total. They had lost the battle, but they had won the war. But it felt easy. The Alpha Legion, known for their flexibility, subterfuge, and deception, had fallen for such a simple strategy. Not renowned for his combat skills compared to his brothers, Guilliman too felt the duel was too easy. The consequences for the battle was that Alpharius Omegon was dead, and the leadership of the 20th Legiones Astartes was gone. Life is often shaped by our formative years. We take the education, the culture and beliefs of our environment into the world, and in turn those ideals and values are challenged. Alpharius was found on Terra, the first Primarch, but he was hidden and kept a secret. He was trained by the Sigillite to be secretive, cunning and observant. He trained his gift and was able to mask his presence, allowing him to infiltrate but also experience a mortal person's life. He was to be the sword in the darkness, one who was willing to kill loyal soldiers, such as a custodian in the name of the defense of the Imperium. He was there, blending into his brother's legion, and even finding them across the galaxy. All his life he had felt incomplete, and knew a part of him was out there in the stars. Omegon, the boy who grew up with no one, who had to learn to be strong to survive. When the twins met, the usual cold and calculating was replaced with joy and fulfillment. They rejoined their legion and brought them into the light to honor their sacrifices for humanity. But war changes everyone. The legion began to show off, reveling in their superiority as the best legion. The legion of lies and deception was shown 2 futures by the Cabal, a choice that they took as sacrificing humanity to save the galaxy. But Alpharius chose different. Why did he take action that defied the choice of betrayal? Why did he have the pylon array guarded by his own sons destroyed? Why not be open to his legion? It was subtle actions taken in the shadows because he was betraying his brother. It was in that moment of Omegon's death that shows shock. His death was a surprise. He himself had killed loyalists in the name of something greater, but he never wanted this. Grief is a hard thing to bear. We have all felt the pain of losing someone unexpectedly. Even the genius calculating Primarch is not immune to the pain of loss. He has suffered so much, yet he cannot return to his father's side. The facade of betrayal is too important. He has to bear this suffering and loneliness for the Imperium in order to protect it, just like Malcador taught him. The Legion following the heresy is divided. The layers of secrets that once had been their weapon have become their crutch. Alpharius knew that the future of the Imperium needed to be protected. He had to be what he was always meant to be, the weapon their enemies did not expect. The Alpha Legion, following the supposed death of Alpharius Omegon, shattered into warbands. For millennia, the various warbands have diverged and changed, such as the Redacted, legionaries who still see themselves as loyal to the Emperor and consider their activities a cull of the weak elements in the Imperium. But this has coincided with many legionary remnants that have accepted the power of the Dark Gods and regularly offer innocent people and worlds to them. But yet still, not as all as it seems. On the world of Sardreka in late M41, deep in Imperium Nihilus, Captain Kassar of the Alpha Legion warband known as the Unsung was sent to corrupt a human psyker in the name of the Dark Gods. But the Alpha Legion faced competition, for Khan the Betrayer of the World Eaters had arrived to lead the final assault and claim the life of the beacon for Khorne. Saint Celestine appeared from the warp not long after to aid in this crucial fight, but surprisingly, Celestine entrusted the Psyker to Kassar, stating that the Emperor had shown her a vision, that the Psyker was safe in their care. It seems that the Emperor has someone in the shadows, a sword in the darkness, someone who has sacrificed everything to bring victory, because with victory we can build dreams. The records call Alpharius dishonorable, a traitor to the Imperium, but all records lie.
Damn. What a great video, man. What a great video, and what a great and interesting character. I mean, I already kind of gave a lot of my thoughts about the character, but it's so interesting, the dual nature of this character. And I mean, it's not even necessarily the dual nature of him, but you know, the fact that the scattering of him split him into two, and there's essentially two different versions of him. There's the light and the dark version of him. They think exactly the same. You know, they have the same thought processes and essentially think pretty much the same, but they have just two different perspectives and views on life. And it's interesting that he's had to essentially, in order to protect the Imperium, work from the agents of chaos from the inside. And you know, it kind of gives me the Dark Knight vibes, you know. He's got to be this unknown symbol of, you know, working for the Imperium. There's no glory, there's no praise, he's just a sword in the darkness, like he said. Yeah, just it's a very interesting story. Very other than some stuff that I still want to, you know, get into, I guess, with the Emperor. He is for sure the most intriguing character in the 40k universe so far, and I could easily see them doing a show just on this story alone. They could easily just do a season or two on Alpharius, and going through from him being found as a young boy and being trained, you know, to him going out in his crusades and finding his brother, and then going and weaving their lie to hide the fact that there's two of them, because they were afraid of what kind of reprisal the Emperor would have, etc., etc. And just the fact that you know, he's been playing up this facade of not being a Primarch from the beginning. He was the first one, but no one knew about that at all, other than, you know, the Emperor, Malcador, and maybe a few others. So it is an interesting what if question of, you know, had they had just come out in the open earlier, to at least the Primarchs and the Emperor, the fact that, hey, you know, when we were scattered, somehow a copy of us was made, and there's 2 of us. What would have happened? How things would have been different? And it's also interesting that both of them, you know, they saw the vision given to them, and they both chose a different path. You know, one chose the you know, they're saying a victory at any cost, and there's 2 sides of that too. You know, the original Alpharius sacrificing his other half to achieve victory for the Emperor and the Imperium, and seemingly that story at the end there with Saint Celestine having a vision of the Emperor. Obviously the Emperor in the warp is still looking after him and understands giving Alpharius aid when he needs to. It's such an interesting story, and there's so many different ways, and it definitely makes me want to learn more about him in the Alpha Legion, and more of what's going on. So we're gonna have to look into more videos about Alpharius and Omegon, and more about that history. And just all this, it honestly makes me want to. It makes me more excited for whatever this show that, you know, Henry Cavill and Amazon are doing in the 40k universe. I've read rumors that they are going to do something with the Horus Heresy. From what I understand, it's going to be a cinematic universe. So they're probably going to do different stories and different shows at different times in the 40k universe. So it'll be interesting to see where they go and what they do, if that is the case, and who's going to play who and what. But I mean, like, they could easily do a Game of Thrones style show that goes on for, you know, 10, 15 seasons just on the Horus Heresy, from all the various different perspectives of the different characters, and really get in depth with their stories. I mean, it could start off literally almost where the beginning of this story starts off. You know, they could, I mean, I guess they would want to start off a little earlier, where the Emperor comes to reveal himself and his conquering of Terra and spreading out. And then the next phase would probably be the scattering of the Primarchs and him looking for him, and then going into the Great Crusade. But I mean, they could easily jump around to all these different Primarchs and show us their stories and origins and etc. So there's just so much, you know, in-depth characters and lore in the universe, so they could easily just do a really good show, kind of like in a Game of Thrones style, for a long time. But yeah, really great video. That was a video by the Amber King. Should absolutely go and give this video a like, give him a sub if you guys want to. Great video, great content. I'll have a link to the Amber King's channel and to the original video here down below in the description. Am doing this reaction live right now from our YouTube members, so if you'd be interested in coming in and hanging out and watching these reactions live, and then joining some of the after discussions, feel free to click the join button down below and see if any of the membership tiers have any interest for you. But otherwise, I appreciate you guys watching this video here till the very end. It means a lot. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, consider leaving a like and a sub. And yeah, I'll see you guys on the next one. Have yourselves a wonderful day.